Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams has been an integral part of the Central Penn College family since she arrived on campus in July of 2016. Starting off as the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Provost, Fedrizzi-Williams quickly became interim president in September of 2017 and president on May of 2018. Dr. Fedrizzi-Williams has had lengthy experience in higher education, including being a professor of communication for 11 years at SUNY Orange, also serving as a department chair, then moving to the associate vice president of liberal arts in January of 2014. Dr. Fedrizzi-Williams has a Bachelor's of Arts in Communication and Media Studies and a Master of Arts in Organizational Communication from Marist College in New York and an Ed.D. from Benedictine University. During Dr. Fedrizzi-Williams' tenure at Central Penn College, she has been instrumental in a variety of initiatives, including our free housing scholarships to address the cost of higher education, the fostering of increased student services on campus, and the advancement of internal communication at the institution. She is married to Glenn and has two sons, the 14-year-old Jake and the 11-year-old Luke, and a spoiled Weimaraner named Oakley. They live in Mechanicsburg. So it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Fedrizzi-Williams here for a very interesting podcast. So we are going to be today doing a simulcast between the Nightly News podcast and Dr. Fedrizzi's The Bridge podcast. Today we are celebrating our 150th episode of the Nightly News podcast. And Dr. Fedrizzi-Williams, first of all, thank you for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here, and it's fun to be on this side of the mic again, where you get to ask me questions.
Well, and what's interesting is we're going to flip the script here.
Yes, I love it.
And you will come back and interview me. So let's start here. You were on way back in 2019.
Wow.
For episode number 100.
I remember.
And obviously, we had a much different discussion then than we will now, obviously. Yeah. The Nightly News podcast has kind of changed, I don't want to say changed format, but it's changed the way that we present and the way that we release information. Of course, we had a 6-month hiatus due to COVID.
Right.
Even when we came back, people were hesitant about getting into a little room with one another.
Yeah.
You can't really have a whole lot of social distancing. You can't have masks.
I know.
So we have come a very long way. But what I want to do is talk about some of the things that you specifically have helped to spearhead here at the college over these last couple of years, and maybe in a more general sense, how you navigated the college through this unbelievably difficult situation.
You know, you could never prepare for a pandemic. I mean, now I think we will be, right? But at the time when it happened, it was so new and it was so scary. And then it was just trying to navigate a safe environment. Then you're making decisions about not just what's best for the college, but what's best for our students in particular. So the very easiest thing to do would have been, we're going to be remote indefinitely, which is what a lot of colleges did, because it saved you the hassle of worrying about the cleaning and separating the classrooms. But that's not what was best for our students. And so we wanted to make it clear that anyone who wanted to come back was able to. And, I'm not sure if everyone realized, we petitioned the governor of the state of Pennsylvania to get our health sciences back in June, because the world was still shut down in June of 2020. So we were able to bring those students back and then have our full campus back as early as August if they wanted to, and then October for everyone. So it's been tough. You have to have a lot of stamina. You have to have a lot of hope that things are going to continue to get better. Otherwise, it can be very defeating. So tough time.
The only thing that I can personally say is your leadership has been so evident through all of this.
Thanks,
and
Paul.
the great thing about, and I know for a fact that my colleagues feel the same, especially the ones I've spoken with, it was your positive communication on a very, very regular basis that helped not only quantify your discussion right there, because I'm sure that there were people on this campus who were not ready to come back at that time.
No, they weren't. And that was really difficult. So it was a balance of, for those who medically couldn't come in, not coming in, right? Staying remote. And I will say, we're so fortunate. Like I've spoken to other colleagues, our faculty and staff, everyone wanted to do the right thing. And even being remote, those people were working just as hard, right? So I was never worried about that. It was more about keeping the experience as positive as possible. And you and I have discussed being a communication major and what that does for you in these roles. And students ask me all the time, what do you think helped you the best in this role? And I've talked about it on this podcast, I think my first time. And it is your ability to communicate. And it's being able to have conversations and providing that hope and being transparent and honest. And when you don't have answers, saying, I don't have the answers, but here's what I do know. And that brings a level of comfort that you really need during a crisis.
There's no way we would have been able to navigate this without your leadership. And I know that you're super modest and you're going to say that there was a team. And
there
totally
was.
I don't want to detract from anything because team members added. But in the end, you're the one that's ultimately making decisions. And those decisions are going to impact the way that you're perceived by not only your internal stakeholders, so the people that work with you, but also those external to the institution who may or may not have agreed with the way that you went forth with this initiative. So obviously,
thank you.
Navigating the pandemic was a major, and it's frankly going to kind of go down as part of your legacy here, that you were the one that guided us through this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic.
That's wild to think about, so thank you, and thank you for that acknowledgement.
But by that rationale, one of the biggest changes I would honestly say that I've seen in recent years has really been the increased focus in student support. I think some of this was happening before the pandemic, but then the fact that we were in a pandemic but still having classes, student supports were needed in so many different areas. So there's a lot of things that you've managed to spearhead over the last few years. So when you think about these student services, what programs have been instituted on campus to address some of these student support issues or even affordability?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's certainly been, since I got here, my area of focus. It was just a need that I saw. So pre-pandemic, you're right. Some of these things happened. We put the food pantry together for our students to address food insecurity. Pre-pandemic, we expanded the Writing Center to a full learning center. We started the Affordable Housing Scholarship, which was 1 year of living on campus rent-free, but we expanded that during the pandemic. So the Affordable Housing Scholarship is probably something I'm most proud of. It's a $24,000 value.
Unreal.
It was meant for students who want to live on campus, and affordability is an issue for every college student everywhere. This is not a new thing. You and I are both college students. I've had to borrow my max. I'm sure you've had to borrow something, right? I'll be paying it off the rest of my life, but it's okay. I have that degree, right? And it does change your life. So I think we were able to leverage our housing on campus to be able to provide that scholarship to students. So, and what I'm proud about is you just have to remain in good academic standing, 2.0 and higher, be a full-time student, and stay out of trouble. I mean, that's really the parameters. So that was one of the largest things. The other thing we did in 2021, especially with the need for support, and students are really struggling, couple of things. One, we're increasing our counseling services for students. Mental health has been something that many people are struggling with, especially during the pandemic and even after the pandemic. It's almost worse. There's something called languishing that a lot of people are struggling with. It's that feeling of I'm not sick, but I'm not well. Remember that line from classic 90s song? And you're sort of in this middle...
Matchbox 20.
Yeah. Was it Matchbox 20?
It was. It's called Unwell.
Oh, maybe, yeah. So you're in this position where you're not feeling great. And you need to talk to someone. And so we recognize that in 2021, added a new line to the budget for this year. So we're adding another full-time counselor on staff. We have the interns in the counseling center. And then we also added 2 new programs, the FYE, which is the first year experience program, which is really about giving a cohesive experience to any student coming to college for the first time and following those students through the first year. In higher education, the first year is the most difficult. And we lose most students between that second and third term. And once they take that break, it's really hard to come back. So figuring out how can we engage our students more when they first get here and make it this year-long experience that helps them navigate all the parts of being in college.
And of course, Janet Bixler is the spearhead of the FYE
Yes.
program, and we've actually had Janet on a couple times to talk about this. I love it. I love the fact that somebody is sort of in charge of these programs.
That's right.
And what also is really interesting about the FYE is to your point, it is those new students, but it's also transfer students as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
their first year. So it's not even just a first year college. It's like, how can we orient you to our college specifically
That's right.
over your first year to try to keep you here and keep you to the point where you graduate?
100%. And because we are unique and we're 4 terms a year, that switch, even if you were a student at another college and you transferred here, it's a big change.
Absolutely.
It's a faster pace. It's a lot more work in a condensed time. Yes, you can graduate faster, but that requires you to stay on top of your work. So that was one program. We're really proud of that. And then we also added the PACT program, which stands for Pathways to Academic and Career Success Together. And that program is designed to address educational disparities of our high academic need and disadvantaged populations. So it's a very specific program for a specific group of students that sort of get brought in a cohort together, and there's programming designed throughout their first term or two. And again, designed to help them navigate towards college and being in college. Our vice president for student services, Romeo Zondikon, he was actually someone who went through a PACT program when he first went to college, and it really changed his life, which is one of the reasons that we brought it here. So those are 2 new programs that we added, and put directors in charge of them. Because oftentimes what we do, and it's not just us, it's everywhere, we have brand new programs and then we try to have 4 or 5 people manage it that already have full-time jobs, and that's really difficult. We made a financial impact to say, no, we're going to have dedicated directors in these programs. So that's amazing. And the last thing I would say in student services that we really had a focus on was increasing our diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. And we did that we already had a diversity committee that had programming. They've been in existence for years and have had programming on campus. But we added a president's commission on institutional diversity and equity. And the point of that commission was to really address some of these disparities among our students and talk to them about how they're feeling, and our faculty and staff of color too, and how we can make this college a more inclusive place. So we did that, and we have an anti-racism advisory committee made of students and alumni, again, to sort of address these inequities and what we can do to make our college more inclusive.
And I love how, not even just in our committees, but in some of these other initiatives you're talking about, you are involving students in this process.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's
critical.
Such an important part of this, because I think even in some of the committee work that we've done, if you don't have that student perspective, you're missing out on a major aspect of positive or negative feedback, both of which can improve the program in the long run.
Yeah, you have to be able to hold a mirror up to yourself truthfully and have your students tell you what they love and what they don't love. And they're not shy.
That is one thing.
They have no problem telling us. So yeah, you're right. That's a great point, adding our students to our committees.
So another thing that we have definitely seen over the past year, not only in just the discussions that you've had, messaging that you've had, but we've also seen tangible evidence of it, is I don't want to say a renewed focus on athletics, but to the point where we've now realized that there are 2 ways that, and especially post-COVID, that there are 2 ways that athletics could go. It could either be dropped entirely, or it could be we really need to provide additional support. And we went the way of providing additional support to athletics.
That's right.
So tell me some of the initiatives that might have been rolled out, and maybe what some of the benefits are that you see, and why you wanted to go in that path.
So that's a great question. And a lot of times when colleges are struggling, or when you're in a situation like a pandemic and you're trying to think of how do you cut costs and how do you keep your environment safe, you also have to think about what's the best investment. And people often look at athletic programming. It's the same with the arts, right? They'll look at athletic programming or the arts and say, okay, we'll cut those. They're extracurricular activities. It's a club. And I think that there have been people that treat athletics at our college like a club. And it's not a club. It is a collegiate sport. And you and I feel very strongly about how much athletics brings to an institution. It brings team spirit. It gets the college involved. Athletes are proven to graduate at a higher rate than non-athletes. It teaches athletes, leadership skills being in sports. So I've always been an advocate. For us, the biggest area of need has been finding home fields for our students. Home fields, home courts. And I've been working on this for years. finally, through some great team effort with our athletic director, Casey Hicks, with our advancement VP, Michael Fedor, Romeo Zondikon VP, we met with the Harrisburg Senators. That's a minor league baseball team in Harrisburg, and we were able to make F&B Field our home field for Home of the Nights. And it has been such an incredible experience. It's unlike anything else. And they allowed us to paint the visiting team's, locker room, so it's in Knights colors. So we have a home field for our baseball team. We also met with the city mayor of Harrisburg, and Skyline Sports Complex is going to be the home for our men's and women's soccer team, also on City Island. So elevating our facilities to match how strong we feel about our players. So now we're still trying to find a home for our men's and women's basketball team. East Pennsboro High School has been a great partner for us. There's some, not issues, but you have to have courts that match the collegiate lines. And so we have been having conversations with a few different colleges trying to have a place together. So we're still working on that. Ultimately, the big goal is to have our own facilities, but until we can get to that point, we want to have facilities for our students they can call home.
And I have to say that when I think back to my career, April 22nd, 2022 is going to be a day that I remember for the rest of my life. So the day that I'm referring to was our community night that we had at FMB Field for our final home game at FMB Field for this year. And I put in the article that I wrote that I estimated 500, but I would say that all
it was around
day,
there.
I would say that there was probably more.
Yeah, there were at least 500. We had a staff member up there counting at one point. 500 people, use of the scoreboard, having our athletes' faces up there and their numbers. You were calling the game. The Senators came in and played music in between the innings. People were singing and dancing. It was one of the best days that I've had since I've been here.
I can't imagine that day going any better. It was beautiful.
A grand slam.
Grand slam. Streams went off without any technological hitches. Of course, 2 victories in convincing fashion,
Large
I might
victories,
add.
Yeah.
That really, in a microcosm, just shows the impact.
That's right.
And we love In the Net. I love going to In the Net.
It's a
just
great
45
facility.
minutes
It's far.
away.
Yeah, it's far.
Whereas FMB is less than 10.
Less than 10, and you have the backdrop of the city of Harrisburg behind you. It's visually beautiful, and we get to invite our community. And we want our community to come to our games, right, to see our players. So that was a big thing. I think fundraising for athletics this year, that's new for us, partnering with the Education Foundation, being able to raise money for gear, for swag for our students, for equipment. We're having the basketball hoops replaced on campus up on the outdoor courts because our students were telling us that, for them, right now they're sort of like half moons. And they're saying, no, we need, I was going to say backdrops. That's the wrong word. What is it called?
Backboards?
Thank you. That are square. So the Alumni Association generously made a donation so we can replace those. So being able to fundraise so that our students are feeling like we're proud of them because we are. So it's just been amazing. Oh, and we expanded our gym.
Which is fantastic, by the way. I know it's still the ribbon cutting, if you will, hasn't quite happened at this point, but we definitely have to be on the lookout for that.
We have to be on the lookout for that, and we're getting some new equipment, and it's branded, and it's CPC colors, and so that came from a generous donation from one of our board members. That's really exciting. And then our food services. So we are looking to get fresh vending 24 hours a day right adjacent to night and day cafes, so our athletes, for all of our students really, after cafe hours, can come back and have some fresh food.
Such a great idea. And we will absolutely put more information to go along with the fundraising initiative for athletics. So should anybody be interested in donating to that cause, that you can do so. One of the last things, and again, here we're kind of limited by time. We could probably go on all day about all of the wonderful things that you've done. But certainly one of the biggest initiatives from an academic perspective is the rollout of short-term certificate and diploma programs.
Yes.
So first of all, maybe let's start off with what some of them are, but secondly, why might a certificate be right for a certain type of student?
In the pandemic year in 2020, a lot of people were displaced. A lot of our community members lost their jobs. A lot of people just started doing some reflecting and thinking about what it is that they want to do if they were in the right career. And so there was a massive demand for some short-term certificates. And that's really, you're taking 9 to 18 months to get a credential. It's not a degree, but it is a certificate that has credit. And then those credits could transfer into an associate's degree at another time, or a bachelor's degree, and then eventually your master's degree. But the reason we did that, it was really a response to the community, the healthcare community in particular. There was such a need for some of those entry-level functions, medical assisting, phlebotomist, surgical technicians, which is really an area where a lot of people had to leave. And so hospitals were literally calling us, asking us to resurrect these programs, because we used to have a surgical tech program here in the 80s. So for us, it was a question of how quickly can we get these back online? And Dr. Krista Wolf worked with her teams to get these certificates developed. Even small business and entrepreneurship as a certificate, wanting to be, a lot of people want to start their own businesses. They have great ideas, great passion. Great passion's not going to make you a good businessman or woman. You need to have those fundamental
Interestingly
skills.
enough, one of the things that I've done in my career is I've done social media consultations. I was a manager at some point, but I work with exclusively small businesses.
Yeah.
And every single one of them, they have a wonderful idea, but they just... They know what they know. And I use this example. I work with a lot of restaurants. So these folks are amazing chefs and have gone to school. They don't know anything about marketing.
That's right.
And so that was always something that I was able to go in and provide to them. But to your point, a lot of small businesses really struggle with maybe accounting or marketing or even just HR, like how to run a staff.
That's right.
And so all of these things, people could benefit from some of these short-term certificates.
And that's the whole idea. So maybe if it's for someone who, they might even have a degree in something else, but they want to open their own business. They're thinking about the associate's degree, but they're not sure yet. You can start at the certificate level. It gets you the basic knowledge of all of the aspects of that certificate. I think a social media certificate or a media certificate would be phenomenal.
We're working on it.
Because to your point, there are so many organizations that do not know how to navigate the communication world, and even having that credential can help them. And then the other beauty of certificates is for students who don't necessarily think that they're made to be students or able to be students, it builds their self-efficacy, their belief that they can be a student. So when you are an adult or even out of high school and you don't know if you want to go to college, you take a certificate, which is going to increase your earning potential, then you realize how much you love it, and it gets you halfway to an associate's degree, and it starts building that confidence that you need to be a student. So
absolutely.
That's the beauty.
Well, Dr. Fedrizzi, so something, for those of you who are maybe listening to this on the nightly news side, we're doing a simulcast here of Dr. Fedrizzi's The Bridge podcast, which has been going on for several years now, and this was just something that we thought would be really cool to do, sort of this simulcast. So something that Dr. Fedrizzi does on every single episode is she ends with a 5-question, as she calls it, rapid fire. So for the first time ever, you are going to be answering these questions.
All right.
Okay, so the first question in rapid fire is the top song, group, or artist currently on your playlist.
And I looked at this so that I'm being 100% honest. I don't even know if you know who this is. Jack Harlow.
Not familiar.
He's a current rapper. I'm very fascinated with his style of rapping. So I when I looked at it, I said, oh yeah, I have been listening to him recently, but prior to him, it would be some 80s or 90s.
Cat or dog?
Oh, dog, all day.
And you have a dog, so we should have known that was coming.
Yes.
The best thing that happened to you this month?
Oh, we're out of April. Otherwise, I would have said that baseball game. Probably just last night, my 8th grader came in as we were setting the table for dinner and said that he knew what he wanted to do for a living.
Wow.
Like, he was just adamant. Like, I know what I'm doing. He said, I know what I'm doing. I said, about what? He said, my career. So what do you want to do? And he wants to be a teacher. He specifically wants to teach history.
That is very, very, very specific for such a young age.
It is. And I said, college or K through 12? And he said, K through 12 would open his options for availability to be a teacher. I said, well, that's true.
Absolutely.
So,
okay, next, favorite beverage?
Coffee.
I love coffee too.
Yeah.
I don't know that would be my favorite, but it's got to be up there.
It's my favorite.
And your best advice for our CPC students?
you have to keep going. And I think it's very tempting to want to give up or to pause or to stop because it gets difficult and you're tired. You have to continue to push yourself, because when you do and you get to that finish line and you get that degree and you look back and someone says, I don't know how you did it, you can say, well, I never stopped. So I think when you feel like you can't do it anymore, there are people that can help you get there, but keep pushing yourself.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this portion of the Bridge/Nightly News podcast. But when we come back from our break, we'll get the tables turned on me, and then I'm going to be the one getting grilled.
Yes.
So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
This is Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams, and you are listening to the Nightly News Podcast. Welcome to the Bridge Podcast. I'm Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams, the president of Central Penn College, and you are listening to The Bridge, where I talk to influential people in our community about their personal stories of resilience. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with the executive producer of The Bridge, Paul Miller. Now, Paul, of course, only produces the show because he loves media, he loves radio, he loves podcasting. But Paul, first and foremost, is also an assistant professor of media studies in our communication department. Paul has a Bachelor of Science degree in Communication Studies from Slippery Rock University, a Master's of Science degree in Communication Studies from Shippensburg University, and a PhD candidate in Communications, Media, and Instruction Technology from the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Paul has been teaching at Central Penn College since 2013. He was elevated to full-time instructor in 2016, communication program coordinator in 2017, and assistant professor in 2018. In addition, Paul received the Todd A. Milano Faculty Excellence Award at commencement in 2020. Paul is the co-advisor of the Nightly News Media Club, Central Penn College's student news organization. His research interests are in popular culture, as he has presented at the National Popular Association Conference over the past 2 years and has his first publication in popular music. It'll be released this fall. Ladies and gentlemen, I present today's episode of The Bridge with the one and only Professor Paul Miller.
It is my absolute pleasure to be the producer of this fine podcast, by the way.
Well, welcome, Paul. I mean, it's not new for you to be in this space, but this is interesting, me interviewing you for the first time, because you have interviewed me plenty of times.
It's highly intimidating.
It's intimidating. No, it's not intimidating for you. Now, what's really interesting today is that we are going to simulcast this presentation with the Nightly News Podcast.
In our 150th episode.
150 episodes.
And we probably would be a lot further along if it wasn't for the pandemic, which we discussed in the first part of this. But yeah, we took a 6-month break, and we've changed our schedule around a little bit. But trust me, this 150 is such a big deal to not only just me, but everybody in the club.
Can you believe... Does it feel like you've done 150 episodes of this? So it's not like just yesterday.
I edit all of them, so it's no.
So you could feel it.
The biggest thing to me, and I've also helped to foster other students starting their own podcasts.
Yes.
And the one thing that I always tell them is how important consistency is. Like, you have to release on a regular schedule. Whatever that regular schedule is, you have to stick to it, because your audience, it's just like part of the reason that we develop these parasocial interactions with these folks. For example, I love, pardon the interruption, 5:30 every night. If I'm at home, I'm watching PTI.
Yeah.
But if all of a sudden one day PTI just wasn't on the air at 5:30, I would wonder, where's PTI? And it's the same kind of thing with these podcasts. Like, it is so important that your audience knows when the podcasts are coming out, when they should expect them. That's how you build your audience.
Were you surprised during the pandemic how tremendous podcast popularity became? And even like on demand, like that aspect of it?
No, and this is why. This is something that's been happening for a long time. We talk about this in my Com 270 class. We look at podcasting and how it's improved over time, and I just think that it was a perfect storm. People were alone. They had nothing to do. They tried to figure out an outlet, and then once people started realizing that, frankly, the materials, while not cheap, aren't going to break the bank.
Right.
And if it's something that you have something to say, it really kind of was the perfect storm. I think it was already brewing prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic just pushed it over the edge.
Yeah.
But people were just consuming content because, frankly, we couldn't leave our house and there wasn't really much we could do.
I know. And you listen to other podcasts.
Oh, absolutely. I could probably list 10 off the top of my head that I listen to. And to me, it's research. Of course, it's entertainment, but I wouldn't be half of the podcaster I was if it wasn't for someone like Tony Kornheiser, who I've been listening to since I was in high school. And he still has a podcast, and he's a very unique person if anyone's ever listened to his podcast. But, I got to meet him before, and I told him thank you. And he's like, what are you thanking me for? I said, I look up to you, and now I teach other people to do this. And, of course, he was very, very humble and very appreciative. But, it's listening to other podcasts. I try to think what and how can I use their knowledge to increase the quality of not only the podcast that I host, but also someone like your podcast that I produce.
Right.
And I also produce Adrian's Pirate Life podcast. I was
going to say, you've really started helping other people who want to get into this.
I love doing it. Well, and I'm good at it.
Well, we love that you love doing it, and we appreciate it. So let me just start by saying that.
Of course.
Now, I always talk to people about their personal stories of resiliency, and you have a journey too. So will you share that with us today?
How far back do we want to go here? I'll share with you what I share with all of my students. I went to school at Slippery Rock, which I loved. I worked for the campus station for 4 years. I did baseball broadcasts, and then I got an internship and then got a job at WLER down in Butler. I was making $8 an hour.
Is that what you went to school for? Is that what you wanted to do?
I wanted to be a radio on-air host, much like you were at one point in your career.
Right.
As I also, at the time, didn't realize what was happening in the radio industry and how everything was being voice tracked and how they were getting rid of local and going to regional or even national, and there were no jobs. And so I came home, and one day I was like, you know what? Being a college professor, that sounds like something that's a lot of fun. So I went back, I got my master's degree, and then I graduated in 2009, and I was overqualified for every job that I had. And so I just kind of flash forwarding, I talked to my students a lot. People come to me all the time, should I go to grad school? And I say, look, don't go to grad school until you get some experience, because what you're doing is, if you just go to grad school because you don't know what else to do, you're effectively overqualifying yourself for every job. And that's what happened to me. So Dr. Fedrizzi, I worked in the restaurant business for almost 20 years because when I got out with a master's degree and a lot of really good experience, I was going to interviews and I wasn't getting these jobs. And it got to the point where I was so frustrated that I found at Harrisburg University, they had a social media summit, and it was a free conference that you could go to. And the reason that I went, that first panel was the job search panel. And I realized what I was doing wrong. I didn't have a LinkedIn profile. I didn't have a blog. I wasn't networking. And so those are the three tenets of every class I teach at this point. You have to be on LinkedIn. You have to be active. You have to keep up with your modern trends. It's great if you write, because every person in our field and most fields, to be honest with you, looking for good writers.
That's right.
So somehow, through a connection that I had through my master's degree program, Tony Donnelly, who taught here for about 10 years, she's gone on and works at Hack now, but she got me in here. And you know what I did? I just grinded. I did the best job I possibly could do. And Dr. Melissa Whaler at the time was my boss and created a position for me. And ever since then, I am one of the first people here and last people to leave. And that's just the way that I live. And I do everything I can to make my students succeed.
And you do. And I think I shared this with you. I was at a Mentor Monday event that was hosted by Penn Live. And there were women there that wanted advice from other women that had been leaders in their industry. And so I got to meet so many different people. There were multiple women that came to my table that had you as a professor. Now, they didn't have to be a Central Penn College student or a Central Penn College grad to be at this event, but they came back because it was at their alma mater. And so they're both successful women, and they literally named you by name. Said, Paul, they said that when they felt like giving up, they felt like it was too hard, they said, Professor Paul Miller sat with me. He went through what I had to do for my job interviews. He helped me with my resume. He helped me with my LinkedIn. They mentioned these things specifically and just said how above and beyond you went. And that wasn't unique. The other woman at the table said, he did the same thing for me. And you are making a massive difference in these students' lives. And do you think that had you not gone through that experience where you couldn't find a job and you had to keep looking, that you would be as effective as you are?
Well, and this is sort of I'll answer this as briefly as I possibly can. Where a lot of this stems from and where my initial idea of even being a college professor was, and this is also something I share with my students, I almost failed out of college. And it wasn't because of lack of intelligence. It was lack of drive and motivation, the same that many 18-year-olds have. But it was a professor, Dr. James Laux at Slippery Rock University, whom I still stay in contact with, that changed my life. It was about halfway through my second semester, and I didn't do well the first semester, and I wasn't doing well my second semester. I had a lot of things going on, personal issues, what have you. And he, instead of doing what he was going to do one day in class, he said, I'm not doing what I was going to do. I want to know why everybody in this class just failed this midterm. And I was sort of at bottom at that point, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to raise my hand here. So I raised my hand, I laid out all my problems, calls me up to the front, he's like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set a weekly appointment with you. I'm going to help you learn how to study.
No
and
kidding.
I went into his office weekly, and he basically just helped me create a study schedule. And it was so unique because I had never had somebody show that kind of interest in me. And he became my advisor and mentor the rest of my time there, and absolutely changed my life.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, by him simply doing his job, maybe above and beyond what is expected, changed my life.
Wow.
And I want to be that same person to everyone else.
You are that person.
Maybe sometimes I'm a little overbearing, but that's just who I am, and I think that people understand that. Not every single student reacts positively.
Yeah, well, that's hard.
But I try to be as honest as I can with people, and you know, sometimes people don't like when you're honest with them.
They don't, but you know, that's a lesson too. Like you have to be willing to take in feedback that someone is giving you that is coming from a caring place. It's hard to hear, but you have to be open to it. You can't just assume that you're great at everything or that you know everything. Otherwise, you know, what are you doing, right?
The one thing I can say about Central Penn is I feel forever indebted because Central Penn in 2013 took a chance with me. Beyond that, they created a position for me, and I feel absolutely valued as a member of this institution. And that, to me, is what helps drive me every single day to be better and not just be complacent.
Well, I love that. And I think, you know, when you get to be around these students and you get to hear their stories, I know when I am feeling overwhelmed or stressed or I have too much on my plate, I just spend a little time with students. I sit with them, talk to them, go to their events, and I legitimately feel better. So, I mean, you sort of touched on this, but I want to know what you love most about working in the communications department.
Being involved in things that actually can make a difference. And I think what's interesting here, Dr. Fedrizzi, and maybe you've experienced this as well, I think sometimes with the pervasive nature of media in today's day and age, and that anyone can create media literally 24/7, I think sometimes there's a little bit less of the idea. Okay, for example, somebody coming in on a podcast thinking all I'm doing there is talking. You know, look at the preparation
show prep.
that
no one
you
knows
put
that.
in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you can tell when you're listening to a show the amount of preparation that they put in. So I guess what frustrates me the most about this field is that everyone thinks they can do it. Everyone can't do it.
Well, they can't, and you can tell pretty quickly.
And everyone shouldn't do it, to be honest with you.
That's very true.
And the whole idea that, especially in the digital media aspect, I'm talking about working with small businesses, this is who I am. Like, I support small businesses. I tell my students this, I haven't stepped foot in a Walmart in 15 years.
Yeah.
And that's just because that's just who I am, and that's who I want to be. But at the same time, that I really believe that the people who I'm training are actually making a significant difference, whether it's someone like Leslie who's working for a nonprofit organization, or whether it's somebody who's going out and working for a small business and helping with their marketing and keeping that money in this community. The little things that I'm doing to help train these folks has such a far-reaching impact on our broader region, if you will.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I love about this area is that I really do believe that the things that we're training these folks to do is got such an important role to play in the future of this region as a whole.
And I think you're totally correct. So what's next for the communication department?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So one of the biggest things that we have really been kicking around for the past couple of years, especially with this increased, let's just say, focus on athletics, is how we can increase our own focus in athletics. And our goal is this year is to at least inquire about what it actually means to be a student organization here on campus. Because right now, the Nightly News is considered a club,
Right.
which we've done very well with that so far. But we also believe if we are going to have a larger role, let's say with athletics specifically,
yeah, sure.
but in other places too, that we would love to figure out how we can make that happen in terms of logistically. And in order to do that, we do believe that we want to have organizational status. Well, what does that mean? Well, guess what? There are no student organizations here on campus.
Right.
Like I've had a conversation with Adrian about it. So we really need to figure out what that means, how we can involve or embed the organization inside of our classes, which we already do to a point.
Yeah.
But there's a fine line because one's a club and it's optional.
Right.
Maybe whereas as an organization, you tell the class, hey, you're a member of the Nightly News this term, and you're going to be working for us as part of this particular journalism
It's
class.
your homework.
Right. So that is one of our biggest goals. And of course, our long-term goal is to do 100% of all home games and then potentially expand to road games. Of course, this was one of our initiatives way back in 2019, 2020.
Well, the
And then,
world kind of stopped.
Right. And that also stopped the progress that we had to try to do that. So, and developing a team, all these things that we really, really hope to see over the next really year. And these are all conversations that we have had and are going to continue to have and to see how we can embed this. In terms of the communication as a whole, I just think that we need to focus much more on the digital side of it. We've addressed this in our curriculum change back in 2020. Adding a couple of new classes that we feel really, really needed. But I think that we still need to continue to, myself, doing professional development, maybe adding some different tools that are going to be useful for students. So those are the two biggest initiatives that I think we're working on.
I think that's great. And I know a lot of our students coming in, they want to learn more about that digital field. And some of these students know it better than us because they literally have been doing it for years. But to learn how to properly edit, to properly use a microphone, to properly be in media is very different. So I think having something like that is awesome.
And the preconceived notions, though, that students come in, especially from social media, businesses also make this same mistake.
Yeah, they don't have the theory and the technique behind it, which does make a difference. They just understand the platform and they do understand the messaging in a way that people who weren't digital natives maybe don't.
Agreed.
So I think that's super exciting. Okay, now I always dig into sort of the work-life balance or work-life lack of balance. And you, in addition to teaching full-time, you are enrolled in a doctoral program. You're approaching the end, but you are thick in it at this point. You're a husband, you're a father. You have a ton of philanthropic initiatives that you're part of at the college and off campus. How do you balance your work and your life obligations?
Well, let me just first talk a little bit more about that. So in 2019 is when I started my PhD program, and I tell my students this as well. I struggled with a lot of mental health issues when I went back to school, and a lot of that was compounded by the fact that I abruptly and suddenly lost one of my best friends just in November of 2019. So I was already under an immense amount of pressure going back to school for the first time in 10 years, kind of doubting myself a little bit, and then losing a friend on top of that. And I basically spent all of 2020 in counseling. And it was the best thing that I ever did. It really was. It changed my whole life. It has reduced. I'm not going to say I don't have any anxiety because I do.
Well, it doesn't just go away, but you can manage it.
Yes, and that's the key, is that I've changed my whole entire outlook. I've changed my perspective.
Good.
What I will say is that the biggest thing that I've learned how to do is all the way back to my discussions about Dr. Laux. I make a study schedule. If you would ask me right now what I'm going to be doing and when I'm going to be doing it at a certain time, I can tell you probably for the next 2 weeks where I will be every second of my day, whether that's in my room reading, whether that's outside playing catch with my son, whether that's out at the baseball fields on Sunday for my, I work with the Challenger baseball program. That is something that I try to instill in students because oh, I'm busy and I have jobs. Yes, all of that is true. You're going to be busy and you're going to have a job for the rest of your life. But making that work-life balance, it's so important. I understand that in a PhD program, until I'm done, my work-life balance is probably going to suffer. However, I will say that Dr. Fedrizzi, I had my last class. I do have one more dissertation class, but I had my last official class last weekend. This will be my first summer that I have free. Now, I do have to take my comps in July.
What are you going to do with all that time? You're going to fill it with other efforts because I know you.
Nothing.
Well, you say nothing, but people like us are not wired for nothing.
Well,
so it gets filled fairly quickly. Just pace yourself.
I'm already thinking about, I'm a huge fan of the show Better Call Saul. And so I am hoping to write and submit a journal article this summer.
Ooh, okay.
So
I heard it's a really good season, by the way.
Well, of course it is.
I need to get on that show because I heard a lot of good things about it.
We'll start from the beginning.
Okay, I will do that. Now, you know what? I appreciate your honesty. I think a lot of people see someone like you and they think, oh, he just has it all together. And
if only it was that simple.
But it's hard and everyone struggles. And I use the same approach as you. My calendar has my free time scheduled. And by free time, it's what am I doing during that free time? And that to someone who loves to live in the moment might sound like a nightmare. But when you are carrying this level of responsibility, organizing your life is a very real thing.
I couldn't not agree more. I mean, even my weekends, like I'm already booked up on my weekends into like July.
I know.
Because I if I see something I want to do, I automatically put it on my calendar, and then if someone says, "Oh, well, what about this day?" Well, I'm busy that day.
Yeah.
So my calendar, I live and die by my calendar,
I know.
which aggravates my wife to no end. But it's how I have to live at this point. And you know what? Maybe when the dissertation's over,
it'll change a little.
I reevaluate things. But to me, my PhD program has been so important to me. I've learned so much, and I love it. And I'm looking forward, as weird as that sounds, to doing my dissertation.
No, I get it, because that's the part where it's yours, and then you're adding to the community. So that's really exciting. Now, I want to ask you, because you are involved in your personal community. Philanthropy is so important to you. You're so busy right now. That could be something very easily that you say, I just don't have time for that. Why is it such an important part of your life? Why do you always find a way to make an effort to give back?
Dr. Fedrizzi, whenever I struggled in finding work from the years, let's say 2009 to when I started here in 2013, one of the things I also realized I wasn't doing was giving back to the community and how important that is in the job search process. Now, I'm very quick to, when I talk to students about this, explain to them, look, the first and foremost, you're doing this to give back to your community.
Yeah.
You're not doing it for anything in return,
right,
whether that be the ability to put it on a resume or what have you. I believe that it's such an important component to who I am, because I want to practice what I preach. If I'm going to go in that classroom and tell them that they need to go out on their busy schedules once a month or more and go and volunteer somewhere, I need to be doing the same thing, because I'd be a hypocrite if I wasn't.
Sure.
Now, what I would say is, don't just volunteer to volunteer. Volunteer with an organization that means something to you. So I'll just give you two examples. I have been involved with the Challenger Baseball program, which is a little league and now an adult league for special needs individuals in our community. I do have a special needs son. My son Hunter is 22 years old, and he has an intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder. And so he has, I love sports. And you do
I
too.
know. Yeah, we both do.
He'd never been able to play a sport other than like bowling, which I'm also a bowler myself.
Okay.
He was never able to do sports because he just couldn't understand the rules.
Okay.
And so it was always really difficult to get him involved in sports. He's a great athlete too.
Okay.
I mean, he really is, but we never found that right fit. And we stumbled upon Challenger Baseball back in like 2014, and we instantly gravitated. I became assistant coach. I went to head coach, and now I am the commissioner of the adult league.
Of course you are.
Because the commissioner who had started this league last year is stepping down, and I stood up, and we've already had a couple of weeks in, and it's just so wonderful. But I don't look at it like, that's a waste of time, or I could be doing something better. Like, if you had any idea what it was like to be out there with these kids every Sunday and see the smiles on their face, it's worth everything. Like, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. So find something that you're passionate about and you care about when you're volunteering. Don't just volunteer to volunteer, because they can tell, trust me, whether it's the constituents you're working with or the people there. Last year, also during the pandemic, not just because I wanted to get out of the house, but because we were also doing the CPC Gives Back, I worked with the New Hope Ministries food bank. And just to see the impact that you had
it's
on
tremendous.
those people, it was unbelievable. So philanthropy shouldn't be something that seems like a chore. It should be something that aligns with your own personal goals in life.
And it feels good. And what's interesting, all research that's been done on people who volunteer, they're happier people overall. They suffer less from depression.
Well, and what's
because
interesting
it feels good to give back.
What's interesting is that was a major part of my, I don't want to say recovery necessarily, but that was a major part of going through counseling is I was trying to find things that made me happy.
Gave you some meaning. Yeah, I understand. Well, thank you. That's incredible. You're incredible. I'm so glad I had this time with you. Now, at the end of each podcast, and you just asked me some rapid fire questions when you interviewed me recently. So let's do some rapid fire questions. Top of your head, quick responses.
Let's do it.
Number 1, top song, group, artist on your playlist, and I will allow you to include podcasts in that because I know that's what you listen to most.
My favorite band, Dave Matthews Band. I've seen Dave over 15 times.
Wow.
Absolutely love him. Always have, always will. Podcasts, again, I do listen to the Tony Kornheiser Show. I got into 2 really cool podcasts. One's called Simulcast, if you're a fan of Seinfeld, which I am. I'm a massive fan of. These 2 guys go through all 180 episodes, and they'd been doing it for years, but I stumbled upon that. And the second one was actually, recently I rewatched The Sopranos, and there was a podcast from Michael Imperioli and Steve Shrippa called Talking Sopranos. So I've been checking in on that too. So those are a few podcasts that I've been.
Did you ever listen to Covino and Rich?
I've heard of it, but I've never listened to it.
My family thinks I'm crazy because it's really a show that's mostly targeted to men. But I love it because their whole thing is like life, sports, and entertainment. And that's what they talk about. And they kind of give a male perspective. And they're, our age-ish, but they act like young guys. Anyway, I love them. I even followed them on Patreon when they left SiriusXM. So that's my favorite. All right, dog or cat?
Dog, definitely, but we own guinea pigs. And I love.
Okay.
I was very hesitant at first. First of all, I wasn't consulted, and just one day there were guinea pigs in our house, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is not what I love them."
Are they sweet? Do they let you hold them and stuff? Oh, that's kind of cool.
Like anybody who thinks emotional support animals are not real, I couldn't.
Oh no, they are
100%.
They totally are.
My mood totally changes.
Isn't that amazing?
It is, and they're so cute.
Oh, that's really sweet. All right, best thing that's happened to you this month, and you can't count the baseball game either because that was last month.
I presented at the National Popular Cultural Association conference, and that is something that's super important to me. So it had been a paper I'd worked on for over a year about Christopher Nolan and the film Tenet, which was his most recent film, and I did a content analysis of critic reviews about it, and I basically made the case that the average person doesn't want film as art anymore. They want the big box office spectacles, and that is a horrific thing for film moving forward.
Yeah. Good for you. That's exciting.
It was great, and I actually, out of it, also was asked to write a book review for the the Journal of Popular Music.
That's tremendous. So. Excellent. All right, favorite beverage?
Mint tea. So I'll tell you what.
Mint tea, that's very specific.
They're called Boston mint tea bags. You make them like you would make any other tea.
Yeah.
You put it in a container, you put it in the fridge, little sugar, perfect summer drink.
Oh, so you drink it iced?
Iced tea, yes.
Oh, okay. Best piece of advice for Central Penn College students?
Realize that you are lucky in that you are attending a school where every single person on this campus is invested in your success. I can honestly say I've been to other institutions. I've worked at other institutions, and we have such a unique niche here because we have the ability to work with students on an individual level. Does every student take advantage of that? No, but most of them do, and those who do see the benefits of it. So reach out to your professors, reach out to the student support, reach out to counseling at centralpenn.edu if you are having a tough time. These people are here, and it's their job to help you, but it's not even that. They
want
to help you.
Yeah, that's great advice. Paul, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit with me today, for letting me interview you, for making me sound good on the Bridge podcast, because you always do such a great job putting it all together. And it's been so nice spending the afternoon with you.
Dr. Fedrizzi, the same goes for you. As busy as you are, for you to take time to do this, it really means the world to me and the Nightly News podcast. But the Bridge podcast, obviously we had a lot going on with Middle States, and our accreditation here is of utmost importance. But I will tell all of you Bridge fans, the Bridge will be back and better than ever, starting with this episode and moving forward.
Yeah, so that will do it for this episode of The Bridge, and I can't wait to see you next time.